Hello and welcome to my channel, Keen Reads. My name is Jared and I figured I would make my second weekly wrap-up video today. I'm feeling a little under the weather, so I apologize for my voice. But today I have 3 books that I finished this last week. 2 books that I'm currently reading that I started just yesterday. And then I did go to a bookstore and figured I would do a little bit of a book haul as well. So the 3 books that I finished, the first one is The Complete Poetic Works of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So this is the first romantic poet that I have read, first of the 6. I've read parts of some of the other ones. I've read parts of Byron and Shelley and Blake as well. But this is the first one that I've read in any extensive capacity. And it was okay. The 3 poems that stood out to me the most are probably the 3 that are most famous, he's most famous for, which is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Christabel, and Kubla Khan. I especially liked the imagery of Kubla Khan and the story behind it in the preface about the man from Porlock. It actually got me to re-listen to an episode of the History of Literature, which talked about Samuel Taylor Coleridge in The Man from Porlock. So if you're interested in that, I think it's episode 690 of the History of Literature. It's a great episode, a great podcast. But I did find some other gems in here, some other shorter poems that I enjoy and think I will go back to. I already read one of them to you guys last week, and I picked out one more to read today, just to give you a taste for his poetry. I'm not very good at describing poetry, so that's why I'm giving you just some examples. But this is called Desire, published in 1834, written around 1830. Where true love burns... Sorry, I'm going to start over. Where true love burns, desire is love's pure flame. It is the reflex of our earthly frame that takes its meaning from the nobler part and but translates the language of the heart. His poetry goes over a lot of different topics dealing with emotions, nature, and also just haunting kind of imagery. Like the Rime of the Ancient Mariner is kind of terrifying in a sense. So, enjoyed my first foray into the Romantic Poets. Definitely will not be rereading his entire corpus again, but I did mark enough poems to come back to that I think I'll be coming back to Coleridge for a while. And I'll also be reading Biographia Literaria in the coming months, which I talked about in my last video. I finished the last short story collection of Alice Munro, not the last published chronologically, but the last for me. So this is Friend of My Youth by Alice Munro. I think it's the 13th or 14th one that I've read, and now I've read all of her, at least short stories that have been published in book form. I don't know if she's published in magazines or things like that, or journals that haven't been collected. But I thought this was average. Kind of something I've been hinting at over the last couple videos is my changing and evolving thoughts of Alice Munro. I'm still trying to internalize and figure out what that's about, of whether it is just the tarnished reputation by the things that have come out posthumously about her life, or if maybe I'm just growing beyond her writing style. I don't know. I definitely have enough of her works to go back to and reread. I've marked multiple short stories that I want to go back to in some of her more well-known short story collections, such as Hate Ship, Courtship, Love Ship, Marriage, The Lives of Girls and Women, Runaways, things like that, that I'm going to go back and reread eventually and just see how they sit and how they marinate in my mind. There were 2 stories in here that I will probably go back to. Something funny, not funny, but interesting about Alice Munro is when I'm reading her work, when I'm reading a short story that I like by her, so in here there were 2 that I really liked, I'm enraptured in the world that she's making. But once it finishes, I have like almost no recollection of what it was about. I just remember the feeling that it gave me. Like this one is called Oh What Avails, and I couldn't tell you what it was about. I can't remember. I'm sure if I read a couple passages from it, I would get the gist of it again. But that's just something interesting to me, is that it's hard for me to recollect what stories of hers are about. Because they're all very similar, but they're just very nuanced emotionally. And it's that emotional nuance, I think, that stays with me, not necessarily the plot. So that's Friend of My Youth, Alice Munro. And then the last book that I read was kind of disappointing, and that was Mary Oliver's Devotions. So this is selected poems of Mary Oliver, not her complete poems. And it goes in reverse chronological order. There were passages in here that I enjoyed and that I will go back to, and some full poems that I will go back to. But overall, I wasn't super impressed with her poetry. I feel like you could read any of these poems and get the gist of what every other poem in here was about. They're about nature and animals, things like that. A lot of nature imagery, both plants and animals. And they all kind of mesh together, in my mind at least. Very similar. I don't think I have much else to say about it. There was a poem I really liked called Porcupine. But even just scrolling through the titles, I Found a Dead Fox. What else is there? Spring. The Little Owl Who Lives in the Orchard. Roses, Late Summer. White Owl Flies Into and Out of the Field. A lot of animal and At the River Clarion and nature imagery. Coyotes in the Dark. Night Herons. Just flipping through this whole thing. Yeah, spring. So I'm glad I did not pick up a complete works of Mary Oliver, if they do exist, because this was definitely enough for me. I hope I don't turn anyone off reading it. I think everything is worth reading, and figuring out for yourself whether you deem it of value. And I don't regret reading that collection by Mary Oliver. There are, like I said, a couple poems and things that stuck with me. There was a quote about Emerson and the unexamined mind that kind of sat in my mind for a couple days. But beyond that, I don't think I'm going to be going back to Mary Oliver very often. What I'm reading now is the selected nonfiction of Jorge Luis Borges. I've read about 4 or 5 of the essays so far in this, and I like them. They're very dense, more dense than I expected, which I don't know why I didn't expect them to be dense, because I've read his short stories and his fictions, which are very dense and idea-driven, very idea-heavy. But so far I've read essays about Ulysses from James Joyce, about the history of angels, which I really liked that one. What else did I read? Some philological or like rhetorical essays about the use of language. I'm really excited to dig into this and read some of the other ones. Here's one called On Oscar Wilde, Personality and the Buddha, Coleridge's Dream. Just really excited to see what Borges thinks of all of these different topics. And then one that I just started and I really can't give an opinion of yet is Howard's End by E.M. Forster. E.M. Forster, not Forrester. Only about like 13 pages into this, and I can't really give much of a review yet, but I'll probably finish this week, I imagine, and get back to you next week. And then I did drive to Cleveland, Ohio, which is about 3 hours from where I live right currently. It's actually around where I grew up. I went there for a concert, and I went to a bookstore while I was there and picked up a couple things. So I picked up some more Bolaño. This one I've never heard of, A Little Lumpen Novelita. So a short little novella by Roberto Bolaño. I'm not sure when I'll get into this. Probably pretty soon, just because it's so short and I'm kind of on a Bolaño kick. Soren Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling, so a work of philosophy. I believe Christian philosophy. I think the quote from Fear and Trembling comes from the story of Abraham sacrificing his son, Isaac. Selected stories of Anton Chekhov. So I've read another collection of the short stories of Anton Chekhov. I think it's like the Barnes & Noble edition collection. And I really wasn't that impressed with it, which probably is blasphemous from a booktube perspective and just a literature perspective, because he's kind of the short story guy. So I figured I'd give it another chance and pick up another collection. And then another author I really like, but I've never read any of his short fiction, is Saul Bellows' Collected Stories. I've read probably 6 or 7 of his novels, but never read any of his short stories. So I found this for a couple bucks and picked it up. That's what I got. I did buy some more books this week, and they kind of follow a certain theme. So I'm going to do a special book haul video for that in the middle of this week, I think, because they aren't books that I typically would get. So look forward to that, and I'll see you next time.